What restaurants you choose to highlight sends a message to your audience and about where you stand politically, that food is political.
TikTok is reminding us that we simply can't have nice things free from politicization, even restaurant going. We're going to break this down, plus so much more, on today's episode of the Barad vs. Everyone podcast, my daily show where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet, our media, and our politics, all from an independent perspective. Up first, guys, we are going to be talking about the world of food TikTok, right? The sphere within TikTok where people do recipes and restaurant reviews and all this kind of stuff. I can't say I'm huge into it, but it is a huge sector of the internet for sure. Lots of people enjoy this kind of content. And we're going to talk about one woman who's blown up recently. Her name is Elizabeth Eats NYC. She goes around to different restaurants in New York City, does this kind of dry humor while she's visiting them and eats the food. And she's supposed to kind of demystify it, just give a blunt look at what it's really like. She does remain kind of anonymous. You can hear her voice, but she doesn't show her face in the videos. And she's grown a lot lately. She's got up to over 1 million followers on TikTok now. But she is, of course, because this happens really whenever anybody finds any success, being targeted by miserable cancel culture harpies on the internet, particularly on TikTok, because she committed the apparently egregious war crime of going to an Israeli restaurant. Yes, seriously, that is what all the hubbub is about. We're going to react to a couple clips from one of the many videos being made hating on this woman. We'll look at a couple different parts of this, but here's the first one.
Let's try Israeli food before we all nuke each other into space. Can I get a schnitzel pita, please? Chimichurri sauce on the side. I'd be evacuating to a fallout shelter right now.
So this is Elizabeth Eats NYC, and she's a popular food content creator. And I don't want to send any hate to this creator. I just want to make some really important points as I continue to show you some of these videos. First of all, I want to say that visiting an Israeli restaurant during an ongoing genocide is a political statement, whether or not she states in her videos that she's not political.
Excuse me? So the argument is that because this person believes that the conflict in Israel and everything they're doing in Gaza right now is a genocide, and guys, for the purposes of this conversation, I don't even want to get into that debate whether it is or isn't, but say that it is. Your argument is therefore that patronizing an Israeli restaurant in America is supporting that or endorsing the actions of the government there. That's simply not true. I don't know, when I go to a Mexican restaurant, I am in no way supporting the current government of Mexico or any of the things that they're doing. That's just not a thing. And in fact, many Israelis don't support their current government, don't support the course of the war in Gaza, and object to it. So for all you know, these are peacenik Israeli Americans or second generation Israeli Americans who don't even support any of that. But you're saying they should be boycotted just because of their national origin or their heritage. That just seems discriminatory to me. And I don't accept for a moment that simply patronizing someone's business means that you endorse their home government. That's not a thing. That's a wild assumption. And I think it's really unfair to this Elizabeth Eats person who is not political to assign her some endorsement or support for a highly controversial government because she went to a restaurant. What? I find this really a bizarre leap of logic, but it continues. And this person is very offended by Elizabeth Eats' original video, which is admittedly dry and kind of makes some edgy jokes, but that's her shtick. She does that everywhere she goes. And we're going to take a look at some more of this backlash after this. AI is the future, especially for content creators. And today's sponsor, Opus Clip, is the most powerful growth tool ever built for creators. Its amazing clipping and automated editing services are used by top creators from Jubilee to Tom Segura to, of course, yours truly. One recent Jubilee clip made with Opus Clip actually got 52 million views on X.
They're not 100% safe. Nothing in life is 100% safe. Driving or walking here today is not 100% safe. I could have a heart attack right now. Cannot predict it. But what we can do is try to do the best that we can with the information that we have.
Bubba's Clip has helped people reach new audiences, drive views to long-form content, make a splash on TikTok, get started on YouTube, and so much more. Don't get left behind. To start your content journey today, check out the link in the description and get a week free of Opus Clip Pro and then 3 months at 50% off. Only available now at the link in the description. Now back to today's show. Okay, well, this next part features this individual on TikTok whose video got a lot of traction, getting very upset over the jokes that Elizabeth Eats dared make amid what I think everyone would agree is a humanitarian catastrophe. But you can't joke about that. That's so terrible and so bad. Yeah, okay. Let's listen.
She also mentions in that video about going into a bomb shelter, which is extremely insensitive. Joking about needing a bomb shelter while eating Israeli food is insensitive and very harmful. For Palestinians, bomb shelters do not exist, and we're joking about Israelis having bomb shelters. Meanwhile, there's an ongoing genocide happening in Palestine. Families in Palestine experience bombs on the daily without any sort of protection. And these types of comments really minimize suffering.
You're so right, babe. I'm sure that over right now in Gaza, the people whose apartments have been flattened by bombs and who are forced to relocate and who are trying to find food, I'm sure they're really pressed about Elizabeth Eats' joke about Israeli bomb shelters in her video at an Israeli restaurant in New York. Do you hear yourself? Like, come on. The idea that because something is sad or tragic or serious or people are experiencing something really awful, you can't joke about it is just not true. We joke about all sorts of things. In fact, that's often through levity is how people cope and process with things. And it's not that deep. It's like, show me on the doll where the joke touched you. Okay. You're not going to be profoundly affected by this joke. A joke doesn't do harm in any meaningful sense of those words. And the actual Palestinian people do not give a shit. They have much bigger problems to worry about right now than what some influencer. Also, guys, interjecting here, I turned my camera back on to add a little more context. I actually got in touch with Elizabeth Eats, the TikTok creator that this whole show or episode is about, and she told me that the joke she made about bomb shelters and nukes actually wasn't about Palestinians at all. It was, she posted and she made this video the day after the US struck Iran and struck the nuclear facilities, and everybody was worried about World War III and nuclear war and all this stuff. It was not even intended to be a direct reference to Palestine at all. So I thought that was some context that I think, honestly, I wouldn't care anyway if it was a joke about Israel and Palestine. That's okay. We can joke about upsetting and serious things, but it wasn't even intended to be that, and people have stripped that of its context. So I thought that was important to hop back in here and add. The reason they don't have bomb shelters in Gaza, and I wish that the innocent civilians in Gaza had shelters, of course, they could go to. The reason they don't is because Hamas didn't build them and instead built tunnel networks for their own people. So it's not at all an endorsement of Israel to simply eat Israeli food, and joking about things is actually fine. Okay, and y'all need to get a grip. Now, Elizabeth Eats did do a follow-up because she got so much backlash and harassment and doxing where she went to a Palestinian restaurant and did not calm down this controversy. It heated it up and, of course, has now prompted another round of the backlash, which this user continued to engage in, focused on Elizabeth Eats' decision to kind of, in reaction to the criticism, go to a Palestinian restaurant. And here's that part.
She got some backlash for that video, so she decided to visit Ayat, which is a Palestinian restaurant in New York City. Check this out.
When people start doxing and canceling you because you didn't eat somewhere, we're here at Ayat in Manhattan to finally appreciate some Palestinian food. While there's a devastating human rights crisis in Gaza, this is simply a channel for food and not a space for global news.
Palestinian cuisine isn't just something to try because people forced you into it. It's a reflection of a people that are suffering. What restaurants you choose to highlight sends a message to your audience and about where you stand politically. It also sends a message about whose culture is legitimized, platformed, and supported. It is always important to remember that food is political. Where you choose to spend your money, what you eat is political.
Hey, so this is unhinged. There's nothing wrong with what she said. She's allowed to have a TikTok account where she reviews restaurants without taking stands on global news and international relations, which frankly she probably knows nothing about. And we would actually, in my view, be better off if influencers more routinely stayed in their lane and didn't talk about every complicated political issue they don't know anything about. And I just totally disagree with this idea that going to a restaurant signals a political message, or like, y'all gotta touch grass. Y'all gotta get off TikTok. It's not normal. It's not healthy. And I think it suffers from this kind of boy who cried wolf phenomenon that we talk about a lot on this show because it infects so much of internet discourse. If everything is political, then nothing is political. Like, if you guys act like everything is so deep and is so connected to politics, at some point people are just going to tune y'all out, and you won't be able to actually highlight, serious things that it's like, hey, don't support these people. They are directly doing this thing. If y'all want everybody to boycott this, object to that, don't go here, don't promote this all the time, everything, it loses all its meaning. And normal people that aren't TikTok brain rotted are just going to tune y'all out, which has happened and continues to happen. But y'all played yourself. I don't know what you thought was going to happen. I don't know if you thought you did your big one, but like, claiming food is political is absurd. Sure, there are aspects related to food that are political, whether that's like food related public policies about agriculture or about welfare and food stamps, or whether it's foreign policy, for example, like aid being released or blocked into a targeted territory. All of that is true, but that is literally true about anything. Anything there is an aspect that intersects with politics or government in some way. It doesn't therefore render that thing totally political, and every minute decision needs to be microanalyzed to see if it's problematic. Y'all are exhausting. I am exhausted just listening to y'all. I cannot imagine being you. It must be tiring. Constantly fixing your mouth to be so pressed and so upset over every little thing, when you know what, you could actually be using that energy to help people in Gaza rather than policing influencers for ordering food at an Israeli restaurant. Like, I find this ridiculous and absurd, no matter how you feel about the conflict, by the way, because I know I have followers who fall on the other side. I acknowledge the complexity. I think people of good faith really can disagree about complicated subjects like this, but we should all be able to agree that this is absurd. And I think it actually has its roots in something not related to Israel or Gaza at all, which is just envy and we're just wanting to tear people down. The internet, many people, they become jealous when they see someone succeed, and they just look for ways to bring that person down a peg or somehow declare them problematic. And it's all rooted in envy. And envy is one of the worst human emotions that we should be resisting when we feel it. It's natural to feel it sometimes, but we should be resisting it and trying to shut that down, not giving into it and joining random witch hunts meant to tear down successful people to try to, for bogus reasons, just to try to quiet that voice inside that we feel that's talking to us about our own inadequacies. That's my take on all this. This discourse is mega viral on TikTok going after this woman. I don't really think she did anything wrong, and I think it's insane that people are trying to cancel her, they're doxing her. Y'all need to touch grass, but frankly, I could say that most days about the people on TikTok. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. Do make sure to subscribe if you aren't yet, to hit that like button while you're at it. Remember, you can listen to the Brad versus Everyone podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, yada, yada, yada. And if you are listening on audio podcasts, do take a second to rate and review the show. It helps us grow. And guys, remember to also send in your voicemails for my Voicemail Friday episodes, where I react to your woke horror stories, give you advice on your personal life scenarios, and answer any questions you guys have for me. As always, the link to send one of those in is in the description. Up next, we're going to talk about a really horrifying crime that's going viral. It's just breaking the internet, and it's leading to some very dysfunctional media coverage and online political commentary, because we really just, nobody knows how to be normal or act normal about any news story. First, though, here's an interesting video from the news content creator Dylan Page summing up the horrifying crime that that's going viral And I think from his summary, you'll be able to see why this is like resonating with people more than just a normal crime story. Take a listen to this.
This 23-year-old Ukrainian woman fled a country at war to live a safer and better life in the United States. But recently, one evening heading home after work, her life was ended in the worst possible way. The horrifying incident occurred on the 22nd of August in Charlotte, but security footage of what actually happened was just released for the first time. It was 9:46 p.m. and the video shows a very normal-looking train with everyone minding their own business, talking, or on their phone. But there's one man in a red hoodie identified as DeCarlos Brown looking restless and agitated. Around 30 seconds later, Irena Zoretska gets on the train wearing a cap and a t-shirt from a pizzeria and sits in front of DeCarlos. She has AirPods in and just like everyone else is minding her own business and using her phone. Now it remains this way for the next 4 minutes until DeCarlos can be seen randomly taking out a pocket knife, standing up, and completely unprovoked stabbing Irena several times from behind. She didn't even have a chance to see the attack coming. Now, as for the attacker, DeCarlos Brown actually has a history of violent crime and mental illness. He's been arrested multiple times and even served a 5-year prison sentence for robbery with a deadly weapon. To make matters worse, he wasn't even supposed to be allowed on the train that night because he didn't have a ticket. Police detained him just hours after the attack and he's since been charged with first-degree murder. As for the other passengers on board, some told local news that they were traumatized by what they saw and that they don't know how long it'll be before they're able to use public transportation again.
So, wow, this story is bleak and it's dark, and I feel so bad for this woman and her family and friends. I mean, it is just crazy to me. I think the reason this resonates and is going so viral, there's a few reasons. One is the fact that she's a refugee from Ukraine. She survived literal war and then came here and then was murdered. Just makes this story exponentially more unique and more tragic. The other piece of it is that this was like a random attack. He didn't know her. They weren't like in a relationship. Most crime isn't committed by total strangers like this, most murders. And just the idea that you could be on the train and some random person just decides to stab you for no apparent reason. I mean, it's horrifying. It's really scary. And I see why it's going so viral, especially because they did release the video, which that's what made it go so viral, is this insane video. I can't show you the actual moment, but I did watch it. You can find it on the internet if you want to see it. It's like genuinely bone-chilling stuff. The other reasons that this is viral is, one is that there's a criminal justice policy element to this. Like, this is a guy who frankly should not have been on the streets, and we'll get into that, but he was arrested over and over again. He should have been locked up or institutionalized in some way. So there's a policy failure here. And then there is a race angle, unfortunately, because everything has to be about race for some people. This black guy killed a white girl. The same way that when a white cop kills a black guy, that becomes national news in some circles, though when a black cop kills a black guy or when a white cop kills a white guy, that story doesn't resonate the same way. In the same way, I mean, this story, there's a racial angle to why it's going so viral, because these topics are infused with that kind of discourse. The first piece of this I want to talk about is kind of the media spin on it, because the mainstream media, that is. Originally, like, immediately after it happened, most national kind of liberal establishment media outlets didn't touch it much, didn't cover it much, which is kind of strange because they kind of do cover these types of things in different contexts, like Daniel Penny, that man who restrained in what he says is self-defense and killed an aggressive homeless person on the New York subway. That got all this coverage, but this story didn't. And it's like, well, why? Because maybe it doesn't suit certain narratives. Well, when they finally did decide to report it, certain mainstream media outlets had a interesting spin on this where they attempted to like tie it to MAGA in kind of interesting ways. So here's Axios. The gruesome video of the fatal knife attack on Erna Zarutska on a light rail car in Charlotte is drawing attention from MAGA influencers seeking to elevate the issue of violent urban crime and accuse mainstream media of undercovering shocking cases. So they've been kind of ridiculed for that framing, and I understand why. It is true that MAGA voices and influencers are seizing on this story and promoting it, but like the fact that that's the main thing Axios is focusing on rather than the story itself does reek of misplaced priorities. It's like, actually, you should just be covering the crime, you know? And then Others, like CNN's Brian Stelter, are getting criticized because of similarly how they're talking about this, and they're kind of making it into a connected issue with MAGA and Republicans, when really, I mean, the story itself is an issue of policy and crime and victimization. It shouldn't be about like, oh, MAGA pounces is a very frustrating framing on the story. Here is CNN's Brian Stelter.
Really, over the weekend, Elon Musk, Charlie Kirk, other Trump-aligned figures succeeded in making this senseless death a symbol of big city crime. We heard President Trump asked about it yesterday when he was heading home from New York City. He didn't seem to know much about it. He said he would get briefed, and then today, Trump did know all about it. That's exactly what has happened here. This story has trickled up from local news to social media and now to the president's attention. And it's being used, as you said, Brianna, as a political symbol, with MAGA media calling for more forceful punishments and more incarceration. I have to say, some of the replies to Musk, some of the comments around this story are baldly racist, stoking fear of African Americans because this man attacked a white woman. The open racism on sites like X today, it's eye-popping. But there are also legitimate questions about this so-called career criminal, someone who had been a repeat offender. And those questions, I hope they're not lost amid all of the cesspool kind of comments on social media.
So here's the thing. I'm actually pretty sympathetic to the idea that mainstream media didn't cover this story enough originally, but I don't necessarily find anything that objectionable about what Brian Stelter says here. He's getting attacked by MAGA people online over this. I mean, what he says, basically every point is true. It was highlighted by MAGA influencers. They did do so to highlight, failed Democrat policies, as they would frame it. I think they have a point. And he even says that there's some underlying serious issues here, but then there actually is genuine racism being attached to this online, particularly on X, which has turned into a racist cesspool. And I wish we could just talk about this in a way of like, how do we deal with these mentally ill people, with dangerous criminals? We need to lock them up. We need to stop them hurting random people, rather than black, black, black. But that really is that all some online voices on the right have to say about this. I mean, this girl who her whole career started because she said the N-word, I guess, named Lily Gaddis. She's now become like a alt-right influencer. Let me show you her YouTube thumbnail. White girl killed by black. White women under attack by blacks, shocking footage revealed. 107,000 views on that YouTube video. Here's the clip of her making this one anecdote into a story of a supposed race war from all black people against whites. Listen to this.
A day like many others, where a white woman is the victim of a black crime. She was working at a pizza restaurant and just had gotten off of her long shift and was headed home on public transportation, which used to be safe, but now you might get your, you might end up not making it to your final destination if you happen to be on public transportation with people of color or black people. So this is just what happens in America. This is what is happening in white countries around the globe right now. Because we have black people, we have immigrants. This is not just blacks. It's also illegals that are coming into these countries that are butchering white people in their homelands. And we no longer feel safe in our homeland because we have these people roaming around, lurking around, looking for trouble. They are mentally unstable. They rove in packs. They're lone wolves, and they commit atrocities upon white people.
This genuinely is racist. All black people, or even most black people, are not responsible in any way for the actions of one deeply mentally ill, sick black person on a subway somewhere. And making this, you're also spewing a false narrative. There really isn't an epidemic of black people killing white people, especially in these kinds of targeted random attacks, non-targeted random attacks, which are incredibly, incredibly rare. So to act like in modern America, it's not even safe anymore to go on a train because the blacks be out here, it's insanely racist and baseless. And two, most of the time murders are committed within races. So black people mostly kill other black people and white people mostly kill other white people. So to make this all like this insane race baiting narrative is genuinely racist. And I think Brian Stelters of the world have a point when they point this out, that this cesspool of extreme racist, far right rhetoric has interjected into this kind of discourse and this news story. It's still not the main story. The main story is this woman's life being lost and the policy failures that brought us here. And I think we should talk about that. But I mean, the right does need to push back on this racialization and this hyperfixation, because it really is toxic, I think. And it does muddy the waters on the real issues we should be talking about here, which are criminal justice related in nature. So here is the Free Press's Maya Silkin talking about the policy or criminal justice failures that may have led to this terrible situation where this man took this young woman's life so prematurely. Listen to this.
23-year-old Ukrainian refugee Irina Zarutska fled a war zone only to be viciously stabbed to death on a train in Charlotte, North Carolina. What feels like an inexplicable tragedy is actually quite the opposite, and that's because the man who murdered her, DeCarlos Brown Jr., is a career criminal with over 14 arrests, including robbery and assault. He also has a serious history of mental illness, so much so that after the last time he was released from prison, his own mother kicked him out of her house for aggressive behavior. Even more troubling is that the courts were aware of Brown's mental health and criminal history and continuously failed to hold him accountable. Despite his record, a judge allowed for Brown's release from prison on a written promise to reappear in court at a later date, a decision that ended up being fatal. The murder of Irina Zarutska is in part so troubling because the 23-year-old had successfully escaped a war that has taken more than 100,000 lives, only for hers to be brutally cut short in the country where she had sought refuge in. Others question why there had not been media coverage of the story in the liberal media, and Charlotte's mayor, Vi Lyles, had released a statement saying, "We will never arrest our way out of issues such as homelessness and mental health." But in this case, there were dozens of chances to arrest DeCarlos Brown for exactly that, severe mental health issues that resulted in the murder of an innocent civilian by a repeat offender. I'm Maya Silkin, and you can read my story on this murder at thefp.com.
So I have no interest in racializing this discourse. For me, it's a policy question of how do we keep these repeat offenders off of the streets? People who are clearly dangerous. We see this pattern, especially in urban areas, often governed by Democrats, but not exclusively, where people are arrested, they commit a crime after crime after crime, and yet somehow just get released back on the street, somehow get released without bail. It's like dangerous people need to be locked up for their own good and for the good of others. And yet we can also have it be true that our criminal justice system, we have way too many people in jail and we have way too many crimes that don't have real victims, and we over punish people in lots of ways. Yet at the same time, we clearly don't punish some people enough, or we don't actually take extreme enough steps to incarcerate people who are dangerous. That should be the focus, and that should be the narrative here, not, race baiting for clicks and to rile up sentiment. That's how I feel about this, at least. But you guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Are you as horrified by this as I am? Have you seen this unhinged discourse? I genuinely want to know how all of you guys feel about this. Let me know in the comments down below. Okay, one more story I want to talk about that I actually missed last week while I was traveling for a couple weddings. But the news broke that the Trump administration is considering restricting trans people's right to own a gun. So forget that whole Second Amendment shall not be infringed. Forget that whole, gun control bad. Actually, maybe some gun control good if we disagree with the group in question. I don't know. Apparently, it's something the Department of Justice under Trump is considering. Here is reporting from The Hills Rising.
Following the deadly mass shooting on the campus of a Minneapolis Catholic school, the DOJ is reportedly considering some gun restrictions for transgender individuals.
A DOJ spokesperson told the Daily Wire, quote, "Individuals within the DOJ are reviewing ways to ensure that mentally ill individuals suffering from gender dysphoria are unable to obtain firearms while they are unstable and unwell." The move by the DOJ appears to have support from the MAGA base. Alex Marlow, author and host of The Alex Marlow Show, took to X saying, "Gun ban for trans is a win-win proposition. We get to watch the Democrats explain why trans need AR-15s and the courts uphold gun rights as inalienable." Or, the trans contagion is officially classified as a mental health condition, which it is. Checkmate.
But the proposal unsurprisingly sparked outrage on the left. Ed Krasenstein writes on X, "Where are all the Second Amendment people now? Does it only apply to some people?"
So the first thing I have to say about this is that I believe there's a constitutional right to defend yourself and bear firearms. I believe this is an extension of a natural human right. And of course, I support trans people having that same right as everyone else. I don't think there's anything about being trans, even if you think that it's a mental condition or delusion, as, right-wing people say, that means you don't have constitutional rights. To me, you still obviously do. And I have to say, there's a huge glaring hypocrisy here. I'm just going to read you. I found a list of quotes from Trump. I asked Grok about the Second Amendment and its nature as a sacrosanct human right and constitutional right. Listen to this. Responsible gun ownership saves lives, and the right to self-defense is essential to public safety. Our police and sheriffs know that when you ban guns, only the criminals will be armed. I am a strong supporter of the Second Amendment and believe that law-abiding Americans have the right to self-defense. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed upon. People have to protect themselves. I'm a Second Amendment person. Very simply, people have to protect themselves. The Second Amendment guarantees a fundamental right that belongs to all law-abiding Americans. The Constitution doesn't create that right. It ensures the government can't take it away. We want to ensure you all of the sacred right to self-defense for all of our citizens. Those are all direct quotes from Trump about how self-defense and the Second Amendment is a core right, constitutional and human right, natural right, that all law-abiding citizens are entitled to. Well, newsflash, no matter what your views are on trans issues, and I've been very critical of gender ideology and trans activists, many trans people are law-abiding American citizens, and they have very much the same constitutional rights as you or I. So were the Trump Department of Justice to go forward with this or pursue this, it would be blatantly hypocritical and a total betrayal of the values they say they stand for. Now, the NRA actually put out a statement after this news broke. Let me read that for you. They wrote, "The Second Amendment isn't up for debate. The NRA supports the Second Amendment rights of all law-abiding Americans to purchase, possess, and use firearms. NRA does not and will not support any policy proposals that implement sweeping gun bans that arbitrarily strip law-abiding citizens of their Second Amendment rights without due process." So I agree with that statement, but I do think it's a little weak. I mean, you don't even mention Trump. You don't even mention trans people by name. I think if a Democratic president had said, we are going to ban all Christians from owning guns, or some other group of people because their beliefs are delusional or they're disconnected from reality, I think the NRA would have called them tyrannical, mentioned them by name, mentioned the issue. But it is a partisan organization, unfortunately. The Gun Owners of America put out a much stronger statement. So if you're a diehard Second Amendment person, you want a nonpartisan group that's not just like MAGA flack PR group, maybe check them out instead of the NRA. But anyway, they did put out a statement. Now, I don't think Trump will move forward with this because I think it is blatantly unconstitutional, and I actually think he'd get a lot of backlash from his own side if he did try to pursue this. But some people on the right are all in. They're all about it. Like MAGA YouTuber Michael Knowles, who any value or principle he apparently will compromise if it would allow him to own the libs, or in this case, own the trans people. Let's listen to his comments on this.
President Trump is threatening to disarm, to take guns away from the trans identifying people. Seems to me pretty obvious that a guy who thinks that he's a woman, a guy whose grasp of reality is so tenuous, so loose that he doesn't know what his sex is, probably should not have a firearm. People say, look, shall not be infringed, as clear as day, you can't take the guns away. We already agree in principle that there are people who are not sufficiently in command of their reason to have a gun. Should a baby be allowed to go buy a gun? Should a baby, listen, I'm a lifetime member of the NRA. I have guns. Should a baby be allowed to go buy a gun? No. Should a severely retarded person be allowed to go buy a gun? Probably not. Should your grandfather with advanced dementia who doesn't know what day it is be able to go buy a gun? Would that be good for him? Would that do? No. I think we would all admit no. Transgenderism is a severe mental illness.
Wow. So there's a lot there. But sorry, no. Self-defense in the Second Amendment is a core constitutional and human right that all law-abiding adult citizens are entitled to, and that absolutely includes trans people who may very well need to defend themselves like any other American would. Second Amendment doesn't say asterisk except the groups whose belief system I disagree with, and it is not remotely comparable to being a baby or having dementia to simply be a person who experiences gender dysphoria and chooses to transition. You might disagree with that. You might feel some type of way about that. That's your right, but you cannot use that as a basis to declare them mentally invalid and strip them of their constitutional rights. Even if you think that being trans is a mental condition of some kind, which I do think it is an underlying mental condition of gender dysphoria, well, people with mental conditions or health issues of different kinds are still allowed to exercise their constitutional rights. People with anxiety, people with ADHD, people with depression, all these people are allowed to buy and own firearms. That's very much a thing. Now, if you have concrete evidence that an individual, trans or not trans, is a threat to themselves or others, then I think you can justify intervention in that particular case, but not blanket dispossession of millions of people of a core right because you think they're delusional. Okay, under that logic, are we going to disarm Mormons? Because some of their beliefs are, no shade, your right to your views, a little out of touch with reality. What about people who think dinosaurs aren't real or don't believe in evolution or other kind of easily, objectively, what beliefs that people view as objectively like wrong and delusional? Are we going to deprive them of their constitutional rights? This is very clearly a slippery slope that in a Pandora's box that you should not want to open if you actually value these underlying rights. And that's not even saying about the fact that you should just care about these millions of our fellow Americans still having the rights they're entitled to. Also, not all trans people are delusional and think they're something they're not. I mean, some certainly do. I react to Delulu people on the regular from the trans community, but many do know what sex they are, but they just have this condition and want to live life as if they're the other gender. But they're not, there's nothing delusional about that belief because like they know they're a biological male or a biological woman. They don't genuinely think something out of touch with reality. But even then, just because somebody has a belief that's out of touch with reality is not a proof they are dangerous in any way, and frankly could be used to disqualify most Americans or many Americans on different beliefs that they have that are just totally wrong or baseless or delusional or out of touch with reality from exercising their human rights. But that's not how human rights work. It's not how, asterisk, unless we think you're crazy, unless we think your ideas are bad, unless we disagree with you. That is not how the Constitution works, and it is not how human rights works. And frankly, people like Michael Knowles, I think they would just flip-flop on any principle if it just meant being anti-trans in whatever way. And that's not a principled or moral or serious way to approach public policy or the constitutional rights of any group of Americans. But that's just my take. You guys let me know what you think in the comments below. Do make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button while you're at it. And that'll be it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk again real soon.